Okay. All right, we here, St. Louis. Second time. I think I was here when? January 2004. And like I had mentioned when I first came out, I've been trying to get here for quite a time. There's this St. Louis stuck in my head because I told you the last time on that video that I had gone to school and met down in the Clark, Atlanta. It was called Clark College back then in the 80s. And I had gone to school with a couple of interesting characters from St. Louis, a brother named Jeff and a brother named Mike, and there was a couple of other people too. But and they always talk about places. You could always tell there's interesting people in places because wherever those people are from, it leave a lasting impression on you, stick out in your head. And so therefore, the brothers that I knew down in Atlanta that was from St. Louis ended up staying with me. And which is interesting today is, I guess this is worth the trip because one of the brothers, Mike, is the brother right there, that went to school with me, happened to show up today. So that's a treat within itself, like a homecoming. And it's ironic because this brother here, it's interesting here because I think it's a homecoming in the particular aspect because it has a great deal to do with my origins of consciousness. Because I remember this was like late 88, or this was like in 1988, and we were searching, and I remember we was going to certain meetings. The Afrocentric movement hadn't kicked up like it would later on come, so we was going to meetings and stuff, was going to old Black Panthers and stuff. It was in the library, was, reminiscing on certain things. Just trying to find any kind of conscious things we could get a hold to. And the brother Mike was one of the people that was there at those particular times, you see. And so as a result, this thing has snowballed into what it has snowballed into. So it's kind of a homecoming because like I did say the last time I was here is St. Louis stuck in my mind other than Red Fox, advertising it on Sanford and Son for years and different things. I always wanted to come here. Now it's interesting because I came here actually January or February of 2003 was my first time coming. I was hooked up with a sister from Kansas, and we rode up on the train because we had this train ticket hotel thing, and we rode up on the train from Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. It's all right there together. And so we was here, and it was interesting because we was right across the street over here in one of the hotels, right across from the stadium, and the shuttle blew up. That I think was last time the shuttle blew up. I think the second day we was here that morning, the shuttle blew up. And then I later on ended up coming back through the help of Sister Linda and Rudra, coming back and all, and it was a real powerful lecture. We still have that lecture on hand, so that's very key. So today what we're going to do, because we got 2 days, but today what we're going to do is I've been doing these visual things for the, I had a set of visual that I did about 10 years ago, and I think I was in Kinko's, and a girl, I was going to get about 2 or 3 of these what you call overlays. They was called overlays. They're called transparencies now, but they was called overlays back then. So you go to Kinko, say I want some overlays, and they do this. And I came in the other week and said I want some overlays, and they was like, what the fuck is overlays? And so in so many words, about 10 years ago, I went to get about 2 or 3 transparencies, and the girl gave me a big stack of these papers and clocked off work and left a damn open machine for me. So I did about 100 of these transparencies and shit, for about $2. And I was able to travel on them for 10 years, and then I went to Chicago right before Christmas. A nigga like that nigga still showing them same ass pictures he was showing in '95. And it was so interesting. So I went up to Detroit and had a lot of, and this was interesting, it was time to do some new transparencies because the way that things had shifted was the Spirit started bringing us rare photographs and rare pictures that our people hadn't seen. And as a result, I had gone, I went up to Detroit in February, and me and this brother Atiba King sat at the computer and downloaded half of this stuff and put it on transparencies. But I was in New York and went to a couple of bookstores and ran up on rare books. In this particular case, a lot of the stuff in the 90s was rare materials based on bibliography. But recently, we started running up on rare books based on photographs. And let me give you an example of what happens here. To give you an example, this photograph that we hear right here is a picture of Buddha, the black Buddha, or the Buddha, and how the Buddha used to appear. So now, the French colonized, I gotta go over some, yeah. The French colonized Cambodia in the 1830s. And as a result, they went into the Temple of Angkor Wat that we'll be dealing with and in Cambodia, and carted back thousands of relics. This is the Temple of Angkor Wat, which we've been celebrating the entire year, and they carted back thousands of relics. Well, this is, and we say, well, why would a temple in Southeast Asia be important? But if it's producing statues that's at the Temple of Angkor Wat that look like this, then we understand that these are black people. Now, it's interesting because I was in Baltimore, Maryland in March, met a brother that was in Vietnam, and said they went walking one night in Phnom Penh, which is the capital, and they ended up on some street, and he said the street reminded them of just like Harlem. There was nothing there but black people on this street hanging out drinking, and they couldn't speak English, but they kept saying, me, you, the same, me, you, the same. So now we've heard about the mountain yards, which is these groups of people that they had a truce, that Southeast Asia, they said that the Viet Cong, the Vietnamese and Americans, they told all the troops, whatever you do, do not attack these people. Because they knew that those were the original people, the original black people of that land. So they said, don't attack these people. But this brother was telling me in Baltimore, Maryland, a couple of months ago, that these were a group of modern brothers and sisters that looked like they was hanging out in Harlem. And they said it was on some street just partying and drinking and stuff, and they said, me, you the same. So here goes again, we're talking about years of people, Europeans sequestering our information. Like those big, like a pyramid that they picked, you know that pyramid, they show it in Nexus magazine that they showed from the 1940s. And in World War II was able to take a picture of the pyramid in China. It's bigger than the Great Pyramid in Hemmitt. And in 1994, they was able to take pictures of Anubis, the dog Anubis, from Hemmitt in Southeast Asia on the mountain walls in Southeast Asia. No, yeah, I think it was Southeast, no, yeah. I'll tell you where it was. It was on the walls. What did they fight? In World War II, they had a campaign in the South Pacific. In the South Pacific. Is that working? But it's kind of, I don't know, man, it's kind of making a little noise, ain't it? Yeah, you know. Yeah, it's making a little too much noise and stuff because the simple fact is this stuff goes out across the land. And so I'm always conscious of that and stuff because there'd be some people from Detroit saying, well, what kind of motherfuckers are in this, you know, in St. Louis with that big ass fan going? And shit like that happen. You know, so it's always some stuff. But our black folks, they, you know, they comment on this stuff around the country. Around the country. I tell the story how I have to change shirts so I got a big old nice pink shirt on, which is dealing with the goddess Izuli, which is the voodoo goddess Izuli that we're going to be getting into today, and her color is pink and blue. So went and got a pink outfit. I said, well, I'm kind of reluctant to wear the whole pink outfit right now, you know. If I was from New York or France, I might be able to do that. They'd say, okay, that's cool. But a nigga from South Carolina, they might be like, this country motherfucker with a whole pink outfit on. But the key here is, you know, so my voice don't correspond with the people who's supposed to be wearing pink. But anyway, I have to wear these shirts. I might have another wearing out of this shirt on the video before somebody say, you know, that nigga, they need to get some new clothes. He wearing the same thing. So I got about 2 wearings out of the loud colors on the video and stuff, so I have to constantly deal with shirts. But anyway, I don't know where that came from, but then again, where the Spirit takes it, that's where we're going to go with it today. But anyway, the key here is there's certain things when they say that the entire globe was black, and there's no way that you can escape the fact that it's all over the globe. And we've been celebrating this temple of Angkor Wat, which is very key. We have the entire documentary. Now, the temple of Angkor Wat is built for the gods Vishnu, Shiva, Hanuman, and the goddess of prosperity, Lakshmi, which is the aspect of Aset or Isis. And this is 75 miles long. This temple covers is almost the size of two Manhattans. Two Manhattans. So we've been celebrating this thing because the brother Eugene Adams, you had a tape? We have a tape called Africans in Asia. And where they show these temples of Angkor Wat and everything. And what makes this so important is because in his particular aspects of the temples, he showed where the temple of Angkor Wat at the temple of Bayonne has the complete history of us going into slavery and everything at the temple of Angkor Wat in Southeast Asia, Cambodia. So this is one reason why we've been focusing on. We did the Hemmitt thing, and we always are doing the Hemmitt thing. We're doing the East Africa thing, the West Africa thing. But at this particular time, for the last, since October, we have a real focus on East India and Asia of the black origins and stuff, you know. As we know, there's several people like Ranoka Rashidi has done a lot of research, and Ivan Van Sertima, African's presence in Asia, African presence in Europe. And so we have to still uncover this particular information. Like, give you an example, the aspect of the Aryans that you hear Adolf Hitler and the Germans and the Aryan nations and white supremacists talking about we are the Aryan people. That particular aspect of the Aryans is only about 100 years old, and basically it became popular in the 1930s with the Nazi Party. Before the 1900s, the Aryans were black people. And they got new documentaries that we're doing. There's one on Hitler and the occult where they have to trace the Aryans back, and they go to Tibet, and they go to India, and they go to different places. And why is it that Heinrich Himmler carried the Bhagavad Gita in his pocket? So here's the people here again colonizing a history of a black people and whitenizing it. If there's such a word, well, we'll make up one. And you know that's you know, it's interesting how the white boy, his laws now is if a word is used over 10 years, they automatically add it into the English canon. You see what I'm saying? If it's used in 10 years and you can communicate with it, like ain't didn't used to be a word, used to be bad English, but now ain't is an official word in the Encyclopedia of Britannica. So therefore we see these Ebonics as being crept up in this motherfucker. So whitenized, we'll use that as a particular term now. You see what I'm saying? Now, but the key here is the original Aryans were black people. And so all of this stuff that they're dealing with and stuff, we're still saying again that there's nothing on this planet that doesn't have its origin rooted in black. Now this is very key as far as the Temple of Angkor Wat, is because the history of slavery is on the temple, as well as us actually coming to a higher level and a higher new reemergence as a spiritual entity, or a higher new paradise, as to put it that way. We like that word paradise, because right now that's what a nigga about needs, some damn paradise. See what I'm saying? You know, I don't want to even damn get a new civilization where I got to go cut some goddamn rocks and build shit after 300 years of doing, you know, not getting paid nothing. So I don't even want to do, you know, I ain't digging up no shitholes and no mud holes in Africa. No, I'm going to where these scriptures say, to a new paradise. And we can't find none from the Book of the Dead to the Quran to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita. Tons of these books, all of them talk about an earthly paradise. And that's what we're dealing with here, and we're going to get deeper into this today and tomorrow. But the key here is this Temple of Angkor Wat. Now it's interesting because we brought the documentary for the people that's interested. The brother Rudra here, Eye Opener Productions, You can get in touch with him. He has flyers where you can get the Temple of Angkor Wat. And it gives you can get, and there's a documentary on this thing. This is our history uncovering. The documentary, I got part of it in March or February. I got the second part of these dancers from Angkor Wat, which we'll get into in a few minutes, that puts people in an altered state. And this is all our spiritual history. This is important, and what we was talking about is uncovering the visual aspect is, the guy Eugene Adams showed on the Temple of Bayonne, us enslaved ships coming to America at the Temple of Angkor Wat. So when I saw this, I said, man, this is too good to be true. But me being a researcher, I went to Chicago, was looking for certain things, buying these books on the Angkor Wat Temple, went to Chicago, bought a book that came from Princeton University, found the actual picture of the slave ships, but I didn't know it until I got home. But I just bought this book with all these rare pictures. I paid $50 for it, walked outside of the damn bookshop, and the binding fell out and the damn, just pictures unraveled. But it didn't matter, because when I got back to the place I was staying in Chicago that night, I found the actual picture of the slave ship. So it was worth $50 to uncover this kind of history, although the book did tear up. But that's the kind of things we have to do to uncover this history. That's why we have these visual pictures for sale today for the people that want to get those particular things, as well as my book, the Cult Melanin, dealing with melanin in relationship with your dreams and all of that type of thing, a little 10-page pamphlet. But celebrating that is this particular picture at the Temple of Bayonne. And if I could walk you through this, of the slave ship. Now, well, I guess, can you see this? See if can I adjust it enough? I guess that's good enough. Huh? Smaller? Wait a minute. Yeah, but that's kind of blurry too. That's it. Right here. In this is a picture. Now, first of all, in order to do this, because we got 2 days, so we need to just do this stuff to get this stuff right, because this stuff comes out on the videos and people can learn a lot of information. But I just want to just do this. Sometimes you have to go with what hits you. You can't go by what is scripted and all, because we're dealing with spirit. And usually I have to rely on a lot of spirit when it's hot. You see what I'm saying? And so in so many words, a lot of stuff I get real technical and I got my notes and stuff, but when it get real hot, I got to turn into the same old Baptist preacher where you have to actually preach your lecture to get up a certain amount of energy or fall out on the goddamn floor from heat. So in so many words, I want to show you this particular picture. Here's a good one. Now, this is before we get to that one, here's a picture of the original Khmer people, or the people of Vietnam. And as you can see, these are African people, African elephants. Big lip, big nose African people. That's good. Perfect. Big nose, big lip African people with the elephants. But these are not the Vietnamese that you see today, although the Vietnamese you see today, when you get this new documentary and just look at them, a lot of those are darker people. And this is some reason why is it that all the darker skinned nations always end up being in war. So here is an African scene of the African warriors going into war. The next thing here, and I'm sorry it's black and white, but this is the only picture we could get. As a matter of fact, me and Ruja was in New York, and I went and bought one of the books, and it's got a color picture of this, but you know, can't think of everything. But in this particular picture of Bayonne, the top, you see this bar right here? This bar means that is one other scene. Down here is another scene. So in so many words, this picture at the Temple of Bayonne probably goes 2 or 3 feet down, no, about 10 or 12 feet down the wall. So at this particular time, they're marching into battle. Here is an interesting thing, because these particular people here have this long hair. This is represented as hair. So these people are different than this race of people. This people is a more Negroid looking people. So these are the people that they are actually going into battle with. Now what is happening here, as you can see, there's one right here with the long hair. So they're going into battle with these people. As it goes down what is called a planisphere, or it goes down the wall, by the time they get to the second level, the Africans have already lost the war. And as a result, they got them in slave ships, taking them away. Now what had happened is, when I first saw this thing with Eugene Adams, the first thing I say was, well, those could very well be oarsmen, you know, of the same thing. But in careful study, I come to find out that the people, these Angkor Wat people, have two hairstyles. They have the short hairstyle, and they also have, the noble ones have a little bundle in the back. And nowhere did we find these people on the wall having this particular hairstyle. We just have these people going with the wall with these people, and these people at the bottom end up in the boats. So Eugene Adams was right when he said that this is the actual slave ship. So how we also do things, because we have several ways of scholarship. When we don't have enough data, when certain things break down, we go to the spirit realm. And when we go to the spirit realm, they'll just straight up tell you, yes, I know. So when we went to the spirit realm, they said, yes, those are the slaves. Now this is interesting here because it gives us a clarity on why they would go to war in Vietnam. Apparently, the French had been ruling since the 1830s. You still need this on? Oh yeah. Yeah, you just be the light person. Since the 1830s, you be Teddy Pendergrass on your shit. You turn out the lights. So they had been ruling since the 1830s. The French got their ass kicked out of there in the 1960s or the late 50s. And as a result, the Queen of England, the United States, the British secret societies, France, and all of the ruling powers said, look, we cannot have any sacred sites on the planet that's out of our reach. We have to control the sacred sites. Now we know this because the guy John Stockwell's book, My 25 Years in the CIA, when they asked him when he spent 25 years in Africa, they asked him, well, what did you do? He said, well, my 25 years was to seek out ancient secret societies. So we understand that this is very important, and this is what they are into. So when the Vietnamese kicked them out of their land, they had to go to war, and they basically fought war over this temple. Why? Because this is one of the last temples to be built in the 8th century of the ancient world. All your temples in Hemmitt had fallen in ruin. Your temples in India had already been built, and although some of those they were still practicing and worshiping in those temples. And in the 8th century, this particular temple was built, the Temple of Angkor Wat, which is 75 miles long. You see what I'm saying? Can you imagine a fucking temple of a complex 75 miles long? So this is one reason why they went to war with Vietnam, because we've been asking these questions. Well, what would make a war damn near last over 10-something years when you think about it, when it first started? You know what I'm saying? But what would do this for what? I mean, this whole communism shit is, you know, when we know that capitalism and communism is two in the same. Then what would make this particular thing be something that would fight for 10 years? And we know that it has to be something much more sacred when it comes to the doggone secret societies. And it has a lot to do with this temple. And I'm quite sure if I'm ruling a people, and there's a temple, and that temple identifies the Africans going into slavery, but the temple also identifies the god Vishnu coming back, the god Shiva, the goddess Lakshmi, and all of these heavenly beings in the temple. They're talking about new reality. Then if I'm a ruling power, I would have to be concerned. And the only thing I got control over is these particular sacred sites, and I will go to war for that, because they've gone to war for less. And it makes sense. It makes sense. And so we've done some study on this temple in I have the last 6 months. And as a result, it's some astonishing information that goes right down to what we're dealing with today, including the bombing that just happened in London. You understand what I'm saying? It just happened in London. So I need to say this right now to show you about this G8 summit. I guess that's the name of it. And because we know that they do everything based on Kabbalistic system, numerical breakdown of the Kabbalah, numerical breakdown of ancient Hemmitt, then we also know that we need to look up G8 and try to unravel it and see what it's about. I can say this particular much, as Dr. Ben has pointed out, that the entire United Nations is based off of the Berlin Conference in 1898. And the Berlin Conference was a conference that came together to find out what European nations will have their input and their scramble in Africa. Who's going to control Africa? Now, if this was in 1898, then you know Africa is even in more greater proportion or greater importance in 2005, because of the simple fact all last mineral wealth on the planet is on the continent. So anytime they come in here telling you this bullshit, don't believe it, about we are trying to end poverty on the planet. Well, ain't you a little too late with that? You could have passed out some motherfucking government cheese years ago. You know what I'm saying? That's bull. They're not interested in that. They're interested in world domination. So a nigger gets to eat. You understand what I'm saying? But who gets the land? Now the mystery here is in Richard Noon's book, Ice, the Ultimate Disaster, that was later on made into a movie. What was the name? Day After Tomorrow. And in that movie, what was the places that didn't get covered over in ice? Africa, Mexico, South America. And they had to retreat to those particular places. Well, this is Richard Noon's book from 1988, goes on to say that, in so many words, that the future of this planet, to make sure that the Europeans have some type of safe haven, I don't know why they want to do this, is to basically take the continent and basically colonize the continent as a mass migration level. You understand what I'm saying? Now they're talking about global warming and all this type of thing on one aspect, and greenhouse gases, but then again on the other hand they're talking about building up Africa, and they talk about these developing nations. The mystery here is we already know of a city in the middle of equatorial Africa that they built. It's a state-of-the-art city, which would be a model in what would become of the entire continent for white folks to live there. So they know, based on this city, and I saw a vision of this city during the Million Woman March in Philadelphia. I was doing a lecture up there in 1997, and ironically, in 1999, a group of people from Trenton, New Jersey met a sister from Kenya, and the sister from Kenya verified that there's a city and there's an area in Africa that most Africans can't go. And she verified that. So, she verified this particular city. So we know now that they know now, based on the raw materials, that they're going to build this paradise in Africa. So what they do is they tell you that we're trying to end hunger. And so when you see them rebuilding Africa, and they call it the developing nations, and they rebuild in Africa, you have already got the precursor into your mind to say, well, you know, they're basically rebuilding Africa and taking Africa out of poverty. And in so many words, what they're doing, oh yeah, the Africans will eat, but they won't have the land. You know the story. They had the Bible, we had the land. When we got through, we had the Bible, and they had the land. Well, the next thing is we got the food, they still got the land, but as a result, they'll have the food, they'll be eating what is left of them, because they have cleaned off the majority of population that they would have, so that they can come in and colonize the planet with no problem, or colonize the continent with no problem. The point here is that's what this particular summit is about. It's about the recolonization of Africa. Make no bones about it. You see, they don't have, they just didn't fall in love with the Africans. You see how they treat you now. They're locking your motherfucking ass up every 5 minutes. They just didn't, and you got more in common with them. You were more industrialized. So they just didn't like the African enough that they could, 10, 11 years ago, they could turn their back on the Rwanda situation and 1 million people die. And then 11 years later, they just interested in feeding some damn body. You see what I'm saying? We don't want to hear nothing about ending poverty. They didn't say one thing that they was going to do this. Well, they did when they talk about this developing nation. You see what I'm saying? Developing nation. But this whole thing about poverty, well, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? If you left people alone, they'd be able to eat the damn self. The point here is they did not go, don't believe the hype, they did not go in and do this entire campaign and this summit because they just love Africans. You see what I'm saying? Now the real deal behind that is this, to let you know exactly. We know that the last mineral wealth is on the continent. We know that, right? Dr. Delbert Blair was speaking out in Los Angeles on the radio about a month ago, and he made mention that from 1998 on up, because the cell phone was all right in the mid-90s, but from 98 on up, the cell phone became something that just so happened to attach itself to every human being on the planet. And that is because they said from 1998 on up, they found some type of material in Africa that is key for cell phones to even operate on a cheaper level. And so as a result, this is just one example of that particular aspect of what is going on based on them recolonizing Africa. And that's what this particular thing is also about. Okay, moving right along, because we got a lot of things, we'll cover different things. Moving right along to just to show you what kind of ritual we're talking about that's going on. They couldn't get Michael Jackson. They tried everything, tried an all-white jury, didn't sequester them. You know what I'm saying? Well, they say you be judged by your peers, and well, Michael Jackson is white, so therefore he was judged by a jury of his peers. But the key here was, it blew up in their face because they couldn't get Michael Jackson. So you got to understand ritual. You got to understand the same ritual that Johnny Carker didn't understand. Well, now we got the brother Azariah out of New York, out of the Bronx, that did a lecture, I think, in November, and said that how Johnny Cochran was in trouble and how they got to him, how they attacked him, and how he's dying and all this. And this was in November. So when Johnny Cochran died, people was very surprised. But you got to understand something about warfare and the way this doggone beast works. When you get in a war with him, and it can be inadvertently, when they set up a certain thing to fail, a certain thing, and you just happen to throw a monkey wrench in the plan by just being a good black nigga in a particular aspect that he was talented. You see what I'm saying? They didn't think that there would be a Superman that would rise up out of the OJ thing. Okay? So all of a sudden now, when he won the when he won the whole OJ thing, you must understand something, that they don't never forgive you. So as a result, they induce the brain tumor, and how they do it is, when you go into the hospital, they basically what they do is they implant you. This is a picture of this particular implant, but this is the standard thing that they've been talking about since the 1990s. But as a result, this is the new information coming out of a book called The Lucid View. And basically, they show you the man's hand. The top is showing you the implant, and then they're showing you this stuff look like a grains of rice in the man's hand, and they show you by the dime and stuff. But this is the new ones here that look like a grain of rice in the man's hand. And what they're saying here is this implant, when you go in the hospital, they can implant you, and the implants can do several things. So when he went into the hospital, they implanted him, and then what they do is they send you a cell phone. Or in this particular case, I'm going ahead of myself. In this particular case, what they did with him was they could implant you, and then they could send a signal through your cell phone, and it activates the implant, and therefore you come down with a brain tumor. Now this is old technology because they did this with Reginald Lewis. Remember Reginald Lewis was the black man who bought Beatrice in the 1987, and by 1993 he's ended up dead. Well, they did the same thing with him. Somehow you go into the hospital, if you ever check in, they wait on you. They implant you, and then they send the cell phone. Then they implant you. Then in this case with Reginald Lewis, they actually sent a cell phone and induced the brain tumor. This is old technology. So they did it also with Johnny Cochran. Now with Michael Jackson, somehow fate has it that he won, hands down. White jurors basically acquitted him. White woman stands outside and released 10 doves. That's very key because doves is very symbolic to this particular goddess, which is the goddess on the scene, the goddess of love, Izuli, or Erzuli. So they released 10 doves. Now here goes a white boy again when it comes to never forgiving you. So based on policy, and we've heard about this particular policy because one of the policies is with the Illuminati is that black people, they have to have X amount of black people killed in the hospitals every year. So hospitals are nothing but death camps for black people. So because they could not get Michael Jackson, they say, well, the next best thing we'll do. So therefore, they killed this brother, Luther Vandross. See, it has to be someone of megastar. Who was bigger than Luther Vandross in the 80s when it came to love music? And before him, why is it that Teddy Pendergrass mysteriously gets taken out of commission? And as soon as Teddy Pendergrass gets taken down, Luther Vandross comes in right on the heels of Teddy Pendergrass. And it's always key to kill the muse because the muse represents a form of Osiris in the particular aspect of the Dionysian mistress. The Dionysian mistress is a person that can produce a frenzy in the females that they can go out of their minds. And although it's a known fact that Luther was gay and all this type of thing here, but nevertheless, he still was an advanced muse when it came to his singing. You understand what I'm saying? So as a result, now come on, man, this man had a stroke 2 years ago. And all of a sudden now, his mother's on the radio 2 weeks ago talking about how well her son is doing and how well he is progressing. And then all of a sudden he checks into the hospital and he's dead. You see what I'm saying? And he's dead. So this is, don't believe the hype about him just dying. The man, if he had the stroke and pulled through the stroke when it was severe, what the hell are he going to do dying 2 years later from a stroke that he supposedly had already licked and was getting better? They didn't say he had another stroke, did they? They just said it just some complications from the stroke he had 2 years ago, and you believe that shit. So here goes again. Now, what is this talking about? Because ultimately this has to go somewhere, because obviously it's not just the people picking on us just for mean-spirited issues. There's something major that is going on. In the particular aspect is you got to watch it because they always take down our muse. Now, it's not by mistake that he was down the same day or the same day after, around the same time that Barry White died 2 years ago. You see what I'm saying? It's not by mistake. And we got to start looking at this thing and saying that the dead people out there say, well, everything's everything. That's how you never catch on. You see what I'm saying? That's how you never catch on. It's just like the bombing. Now, they had a big article in the paper, New York Times. When was the bombing? On Thursday or Wednesday? It was the 7th. Was on Thursday. Well, on Wednesday, the 6th, they had a big thing in the New York Times about how they need, not the New York Times, the Washington Post, about how the United States military was going to work with state and local transit authority to see if the trains were safe. And then the very next day, London gets blown up, and the first thing they do is they have lockdown all over the country where they got dogs and German shepherds and Rottweilers or what, bulldogs, whatever they use, on every train in every major city in America. It's not by mistake, you see. So, yeah.
What happened in London?
You didn't hear about London, the explosion that happened in London? Oh, man. They blew up the train station, and it was the biggest thing in the last 2 days. 700 people got wounded, and about 20, how much? Over 50 people died. And they blew up a bus, and they blew up the trains in London. Now remember now, you get the book, my man even has the tape, Alex Jones. That's the one you need to get. What's his name? Alex Jones. What's the name of that? 9/11. You have Alex Jones? You didn't get Alex Jones. We'll send you, I'll send you a copy of it. Alex Jones, 9/11, The Road to Tyranny. And in there, basically, to cause the panic, you have to blow up something national. You have to blow up something. Well, the first thing they do is it started from the 1930s, whereas they blew up the Reichstag building. Hitler blew up the Reichstag building, which was a heavy government building in Germany. This caused panic with the Germans, and then therefore Hitler can come in with National Socialism and the Nazi Party and basically take Germany by this one act of blowing up a certain building to the point that the people became fearful. And so based on worldwide panic, they can do things as far as putting you on lockdown. Well, it's the same thing with the World Trade Center, and it's the same thing now in Europe with this bombing. But then again, on the other hand, we on orange alert now, here. Yeah, yeah, right. So we got this orange alert. It's all in the movie. What's the movie about the people that was in the 1800s? Came out last summer. It was in the 1700s. In the 1700s, they was like log cabins and stuff, like Puritan people, and they was going in fear of the people in the woods, the village. And they had the color codes, orange, red. When they say these monsters are coming out of the woods, and the whole shit was a hoax. They had trained these children, and they grew up in fear of there's something in the unknown that terrorizes them, where you get the word terrorism from. And as a result, there was nothing. But on the other side of the woods from the 1700s was nothing but a highway in 2004. And these people had been raised in a national park in the 15 or 14 through, I think, the 1700s in a national park or reserve, because some rich man decided that their families or several families came together and raised these children in fear and raised them in a whole nother dimension. So they showed you in that particular movie, reality is only what the government wants you to believe. You see what I'm saying? Want you to believe. Now, what is the goal behind this? Because we'll give you all of this, but then again, you must understand, we only give this doom and gloom, but the simple fact here is, remember now, we the motherfuckers running this thing. The white man might run around this motherfucker, but he don't run this motherfucker. We run it. And until we realize that, you see what I'm saying? So they're going to play on our fear. Well, let them play on the masses of the fear, because the masses have never done anything but died. But we must understand that we are the people in control, which we're going to get into in a few minutes. But the key here is, what they're trying to do is based on martial law is this. The airports have been on lockdown since 2001. That's the Homeland Security. Homeland Security and the Patriot Act and all of this stuff was only in operation on the periphery, the airports. That's the first place you lock down. The next thing was to bring this thing inland. So Homeland Security had to go inland. So the first thing was to cripple the court system with this guy Brian Nichols down in Atlanta that shot up the judge and shot up all these people and went on a rampage, which is MK Ultra, is what happened. He was under MK Ultra. And I tell the story about a guy by the name of Calvin Brady. And Calvin Brady was a guy that was in Atlanta, Georgia, during the first Gulf War in 1991. He was in Atlanta. He was in the crazy house. They evaluated him 12 o'clock one day. And he said, look, when I get out of here tonight, I'm going to go get a gun and I'm going to kill up some people. So they let his ass out by 3 o'clock. He gets on the bus. He wanted to shoot the people on the bus. This is under MK Ultra. But MK Ultra say is you don't shoot a bunch of black people because nobody give a damn. They die every day. You need to shoot some real law-abiding white folks, and then it's a panic. So he didn't have the gun on the bus, so he went home that day. He got a gun. He went out to Perimeter Mall the next day after getting released out of the doggone hospital and shot up a bunch of people and killed 4 white men. No, 3 white men and a white woman at Perimeter Mall in the middle of the mall. So when they got to him, they asked him, they had an interview with him when he was walking to the police car, and he said, look, I have an implant in my head. So we still talking about the same MK Ultra. It's not by mistake that Manchurian Candidate will be re-released again with our top star Denzel Washington playing the role. And 6 months later, this guy go on a killing rampage on 3/11. He's also, Wesley Snipes came out with the same movie called Unstoppable, where he's under MK Ultra. Under MK Ultra. You understand what I'm saying? So now the key here is the guy was under MK Ultra. He shot up all the people. He shot up all the people. And then so happened he goes up into Buckhead in Atlanta, meets this guy working in his yard, la-da-da-da-da, come up into him and say, I want your car and your gun and your badge. Now how can you just go up on a person, you don't know what this guy got, and go up to him and kill him, take his car, take his badge, and this guy just so happened to be working for Homeland Security. He was a U.S. Customs agent that was sent there from Charlotte about 2 weeks before. The U.S. Customs was taken over by Homeland Security in 2002. And now he's working for Homeland Security, which automatically makes it under the Terrorist Act. And so therefore, Homeland Security now can directly take over the court system. So the bombing, so that's inland. The bombing, and just so happened because he rode MARTA to Buckhead, which is our transit system, to Buckhead to kill this guy, it all connects. And then you have the aspect of the bombing in London, and the first thing is we are now waiting for Homeland Security to do a briefing at 2 o'clock. I'm like, what the fuck Homeland Security in America got to do with that if you understand that it's all under the same queen? It's all one system. Iraqi freedom, which is these freedom people was who? The British and America. So in so many words, this is to go ahead with the lockdown, but you must understand it is to contain you. Now let's get into this to understand the containment of you. The mystery is, we got a sister that works in, she works in Detroit, Michigan, and she works in the lab. And since the 1990s, this has been 7 or 8 years ago, they had noticed that the DNA, this is the same thing, the DNA. If you took it this way, you get cycles. If you put it this way, it's DNA. You put it this way, and it is the cycles of the earth. Amethyst, shamanic, amethyst, pagan, religious, monotheistic, atheist, rationalist, nihilist, chaos, pandemonium. So we're talking about a flow of the world's spiritual systems on the planet. On the planet. What is going on? To understand this, you must understand alchemy and understand several things that is going on. We'll get deeper into this as we go on. Here's a picture of a tarot card, Death. of Aleister Crowley's Thoth-to-Rote deck to try to understand what is going on. Now, to understand that, you must understand this. Here's a paper from Chicago Defender, State of Emergency, the state of emergency, where they talk about, they have just named a AIDS bill after us called the African American HIV and Response Act. So we actually have a bill in Congress that is named after us, the African American HIV and Response Act. That's named after us. Now, in this particular bill, why are they attacking us when it comes to AIDS? So that's why this whole download thing you've been hearing about this guy. First of all, this download culture shit, that's a whole nother thing that's going on. I'm going to show you this. That's a whole nother thing that's going on. This download culture thing. That's to give you the excuse that, somehow we somehow have a form of homosexuality rampant in our community, which is all bullshit. The mystery here is that's to pinpoint us as the particular problem. They're getting ready to have a whole conference down in Atlanta, the CDC, on black men and AIDS and all this bullshit. Remember, there is no AIDS. There's only these polls, and these polls suggest that whenever they want to give you something, they would just make this poll up. So this whole concept of black people having AIDS and white men not, all because you all of a sudden gayer than white folks. You see what I'm saying? And it's like Bobby E. Wright told you, hell, they asexual, that's just their nature. Now all of a sudden now you gayer than them, whereas a particular point whereas they got to come and just label you and take a bill and name the bill after you. Well, the next thing here is this. You've been seeing this in the post office. Test early for sickle cell. We just blew up the stamp, so it's not going to be clear because I had to blow it up from a small stamp. On these stamps. Now what the deal here is, they're saying that sickle cell and AIDS is the same. There's a movie out called Behind the Red Door with it's on Showtime with Kira Sedgwick, which is one of the, and what's this guy, Kiefer Sutherland. And in this movie they announce about this guy who's a designer that's having AIDS. The so-called has AIDS, but they don't never say the word AIDS. They talk about him being on AZT, which actually kills you because there's no such thing as AIDS. It's AZT poison. They talk about him being on AZT, but they never say AIDS. The entire time they talk about anemia. Anemia. He's anemic. He's anemic. We got a guy that works down in Atlanta, had done work with, he worked in the medical association. He said based on what they call anemia and AIDS the same thing. You see, anemia and AIDS the same thing. So what the deal here is, what they're calling anemic and AIDS, they're lumping it together so therefore they can pinpoint black people. The great mystery here was going back to what I was talking about here with this, it's all based on this. Now, Delbert Blair had done a tape about 10 years ago where he talked about whatever disease, whatever thing that they was dealing with AIDS as far as AZT or whatever type thing they do, that's what killed them because there's no such thing as AIDS. No such thing as AIDS. He said that basically whatever they was doing as far as the warfare that they was killing the people off, it didn't work with people who had sickle cell. The sickle cell stopped everything in Africa that was scared the shit out of AIDS or whatever whatever they was doing with the AZT and stuff. They couldn't kill the Africans because of the sickle cell. So he made mention in 1990 and 1993 that they had to start putting money in sickle cell research to learn how to combat sickle cell or cure sickle cell, so therefore they could kill the people with the disease they call it, or the AZT, or the germ warfare that they later on call AIDS. Now, which is interesting here because of the woman in, she comes from Togo, which is near Benin, Africa, where you get your voodoo from, and she's from Togo, and in the particular, she's a voodoo high priest. So she came to Morehouse Medical School in October, and she was talking about the practice of the voodoo and all this spiritual thing, and then all of a sudden, somebody asked her at the Morehouse Medical School, because she is supposed to be a holistic health person. So basically, she was a person that deals with the spirit world, and she was able to, based on the spirit world, able to cure people from any disease. So they asked her about AIDS. She says, she was in her 40s, like 48. And she said in her entire time of being a high priestess in Africa, and she was born into the religion, or the spiritual system, her entire time she has never heard of anything called AIDS. She said, and all the people who was diagnosed with AIDS happened to be diagnosed with something else, and they call it AIDS. You see what I'm saying? So now, what is this? As you can see, this particular tarot card of death, number one, he's wearing the crown of Osiris, which so happens to be the same replica of this that you saw in the movie Star Wars with Darth Vader. It's all the same thing. All the same thing. You will see here this particular skeleton, and the skeleton always, anytime you see the skeleton, there's no spooked out thing about it. The Africans were very genius. What is an ancestor? An ancestor is a person who's not living on the earth anymore. It's a person that has made the transition. And if a person is not living on the earth anymore, their remains would be what? Skeletons, skulls, bones. So whenever you saw the skeleton, skulls, and bones, it was no more than a symbol or a hieroglyphic symbol of the ancestors. And we look at this and we're spooked out about the skeletal remains, and yet everybody here got a skeleton up under their skin. But the Africans would always symbolize the ancestors, the ancient Africans, with the skulls, skeletons. So here you see a skeleton, which means it's dead, but it also represents the ancestor. You see the helmet, which means it's a god. It's the crown of Osiris. Then you will see him with what is called a skiff or a sickle. The same as the sickle cell. This sickle is some type of, to make it more dramatic, some type of extraterrestrial type of genetic warrior that they talk about, the midichlorians in Star Wars. But they said that the midichlorians, one of the guys that Darth Vader supposed to took his thing after was a guy that was able to bring the dead back by using the force of the midichlorians. Now, what is this going to? If you understand that this particular sickle is connected with sickle cell, and in here you will see this particular figure back here was like a ghost. You will see the fish, the symbolic of you'll see the fish, the symbolic of the Christ. You'll also see the scorpion or the crab. You see the serpent, and different symbologies of our ancient symbols that is also, when you break this down, it's talking about the genetic makeup of our body. Well, in so many words, what is going on here is this. We know there's no such thing as AIDS. We know now that there's only AZT poisoning. AZT poisoning. Was it AZT or ATZ? AZT poisoning, which riddles the body and kills the people. So what is this all about? The AZT is actually some type of government warfare against the genetics of black people that carry certain properties in their microscopic organism of the genetics, which would be the extraterrestrial invasion. There's a movie called Cowboy Bebop. And in that movie, came out in 2001, and in that particular movie, they talk about this particular virus or this particular government nanovirus. Nanotechnology is the government's technology that's dealing with stuff on a small level. In that nanotechnology, that nanovirus and stuff, they talk about this stuff that was made up of some stuff that the government invented. It attacked the molecular structure of the DNA. And that's exactly what the AZT is doing. Now going back, there's a sister from Detroit, and the sister from Detroit said that by them studying our DNA, that the DNA that they were studying meant that on the DNA every day